Hi, I'm Diane McGarry with Drake Arts. With me today are co-host Tom McGarry, author Peter Clenott, and ASL interpreter Julia. Peter was born in Portland, Maine, and graduated from Bowdoin College. He has been writing for half a century. After his last college exam in May 1973, he went out into the student lounge with a notebook, several sharpened pencils, an eraser, and began to write. I love that. In 2009, Hunting the King was published by a Canadian firm. Subsequently, Devolution and The Hunted were published. The Unwanted came out in 2021, and its sequel, The Unfound, is being published in July 2024, so it has just come out. And I can't pronounce this. LIGEIA is also
LIGEIA.
LIGEIA, thank you. LIGEIA is also being published by Lowell Best Books next year in July 2025. Peter has 3 children and currently lives in Haverhill with his son, Stephen. He works at Community Teamwork, Inc. in Lowell, and right now he's working on a rewrite of a global warming novel called BROIL. That's exciting. How do you do a rewrite, Peter?
That particular book has been sitting for a while, and I decided to take another look at it, and I've done a substantial change. But actually, there's been a change in the publication that you've mentioned. The novel, The Unfound, which is the sequel, was supposed to come out in July, but my publisher wanted me to write a third novel, a prequel,
Oh, wow.
which I finished in the spring. And then I decided that I thought the prequel should come out first, so that the schedule has changed a bit. So the prequel actually will now come out. The schedule date is December 31st, but I'm hoping they can get it out a little earlier because there are some contests which have deadlines, so I'm not sure. And the sequel, which was coming out in July, will be next year, and then we'll see LIGEIA the year after, or who knows.
Wow, that's cool. So how do you get into these prequels and sequels? How does that work?
Well, the foundation of the novel that came out 2 years ago, The Unwanted, is based upon my grandfather, who was a Harvard graduate, Harvard Law School graduate. He was a World War I veteran. He was a commander of Dow Field in Bangor, Maine. At the beginning of World War II, the commander of an air base in Iceland during the war, and then a prosecutor of Nazis at the end of the war. And while he was there, this all comes through my mother, who passed away a few years ago. But apparently, while he was there, like many other American soldiers, he had an affair with a German woman that produced a daughter, half sister to my mother. So somewhere over in Germany, I may have an aunt. I don't know. My grandmother and my mother did not want her to come to the United States. She never came, so far as I know. I can only suppose that my grandfather sent money overseas to support them, but I've had no connection with them. That's basically the foundation of what got me interested in writing, setting something in Germany, which is the book, The Unwanted, which came out in 2021.
Yeah.
The sequel, so the Level Best Books, which is my publisher, tends to publish basically mysteries. And a lot of the authors tend to have series. I'm the Teaneck, New Jersey Detective series, or the Bangor, Maine Detective series. The comfy beach read mysteries. I don't like writing that kind, but they tend to write series. Sherlock Holmes, Agatha Christie series. And I guess for marketing purposes, that's the smart thing. Readers become attached to a particular detective, then they want to see more books. So it makes sense. So that's what has led me to write a couple other books with the detective since The Unwanted came out.
Interesting. Wow.
So how did you get into writing? You just sat down and started writing? Did you know that you were going to write books?
No, I had no idea. When I was a kid, I don't know if you remember, like the Freddie the Pig series. Probably not. Children's books, I would read. So I read a lot. Then as I got into school, I stopped reading altogether. Then, of course, as once I got into college, I picked up reading again so that I didn't have to read the textbooks.
Mm.
My father had was a big paperback reader, so he read Heinlein, Asimov. So I got into a lot of science fiction at that time. So I did a lot of reading. Why I decided to start writing, I have no idea, except having graduated, I had no idea what I was going to do now. So I said, well, why didn't I write? So I started writing a science fiction novel. But as you said in the introduction, it's been 50 years, and it's very difficult. Particularly now, it's a lot more difficult to get published, to find an agent than I think it was 50 years ago. If I had written the novels that I've written recently back then, it might have been a lot easier. But it's been a struggle these days. I think when you try to approach an agent, so for any writer out there who's trying to break in, I think a lot of it is when you're trying to submit something, they ask you, are you on Facebook? Are you on Instagram? Are you on TikTok? How many followers do you have? How many, if you've sold any books, how many have you sold? It's as if they want a finished product before they take you on. They're not willing to gamble on somebody new. That's what makes it tough.
How can you be a finished product if you haven't a beginning?
Yeah.
It's a good question. So it's tough. I think, and to some degree, it's who you know.
Oh.
So, for example, going to a Harvard or an Ivy League school, it's not necessarily the education you get, because you can get a good education at junior colleges. It's who are the alumni, who can you make contact with after you've graduated, which is important. And unfortunately, regards Bowdoin, well, as I could have a seance and try to contact Longfellow and Hawthorne, but that's about as far as I could go. And they probably wouldn't help me either.
It's a great college.
Yeah.
It's really nice up there.
It's changed since I've been there. It was not co-ed when I was there.
Oh.
It became co-ed the fall after I left. They were co-ed. Yeah, they were co-eds from
until you got
exchange.
off campus, and then they said,
Yes.
okay, now we can do it.
Yes, I know. They knew. All right, Clennott's gone. Now we can go.
That's funny. So you decided to write about your grandfather and his story?
I got into screenplays also for a while. So I wrote a screenplay about a young Jewish attorney who goes overseas, falls in love with a daughter of one of the Nazis who was being prosecuted. She kills her father, but you don't know whether she's also a victim of her father or she was just as guilty as he was. But I put that aside, and then about 4 years ago, I decided I'm going to try to sell again. All this failure for all this time. So what sells? So if you watch PBS at all, there are a lot of there's a lot of mystery. So I thought, okay, I'll try mystery. I'll try European, and the story about my grandfather. Well, maybe I could make a novel out of that. So I started doing research on that, because there had to be a lot more. Yeah. And the first thing I did was read about the Nuremberg trials, and I learned a lot. When I write, what I try to do not only is entertain, which obviously you have to entertain, but also maybe the reader can get something out of it. So I learned from my research that the Nazis in the fall of 1939 had a program designed to do away with some of their own children.
Oof.
Some of the Nazi children?
Yes, they wanted to purify the race.
So if it wasn't a pure baby, they would just get rid of it?
So in other words, if you had a child who had physical or mental disability, you could sign it over to an institute, or your psychiatrist could, and they would euthanize them. In fact, the gas that was used on the concentration camps was first experimented on these people.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, they would have these buses blocked off with pipes leading into the bus, and they'd put the children in, and that would be that.
Oh boy.
Or you'd have children who would be sent to these euthanasia centers, and within weeks they would die of tuberculosis or something else. But they were putting them down because they didn't want these children to pass on bad genes. Eugenics was actually a very popular theory in the United States in the 1930s as well. Why should we allow these people to pass on their genes? We want a healthy race. And
We don't talk about that much anymore, but you're right. It really was a part of every place at the time.
yeah. So that was one of the things that I learned. So out of that came the main character for the Unwanted, Hannah Ziegler. When you open that novel, I'm always thinking movie. The first thing you would see would be the Germans invading Poland, September 1939. In black and white, you'd see the soldiers marching across the line, the tanks, airplanes dropping bombs. But you're not hearing the sound of war. What you're hearing is this bizarre chant, over and over again, irritating, annoying. And then you're seeing a car driving on a German highway between forests, and still you're hearing that annoying, irritating over and over and over again. And then you're in the car, and the camera is focused in the back seat on the source of that chant. It's 13-year-old Hannah Ziegler.
Oh.
And she is sitting in the back seat. She's got a worn out suitcase between her legs. She's using that as a prop to write a letter, and she's just madly writing into it, chanting, and at the same time dovening back and forth.
Oh.
In the front seat is her grandfather, who detests her, and her psychiatrist. And they're taking her to a euthanasia center to be put down. So to me, it's a powerful opening. You hear the grandfather at some point turn to the psychiatrist and say, kind of nudge him, how are they going to do it? How are they going to put her down? The psychiatrist is rather put back by it. He signed the papers. He's responsible for sending her there, but still he was a little shocked that the grandfather, within 2 feet of this young woman, is saying how they're going to put her down. As far as he's concerned, she's not of my blood. I don't care. I have no feelings for her. I don't care what they do to her. Just how are they going to do it? And the psychiatrist says that tries to ameliorate. Hannah, it's all right. Don't worry. You're going to this very nice place. There'll be gardens, flowers, fountains. You'll have a roommate. It'll be like you're a fairy tale princess in this fairy tale castle. And suddenly Hannah stops this chant. And it's the silence that is even more upsetting to these two older men than her chant. What did we say? What is she going to do? And in fact, what she says is, one question here, doctor, please. And he says, yeah, anything. What is it? Anything you want. And finally, she raises her eyes to these two men who are sending her to her death. And she says very calmly, how are they going to do it? So to me, it's a powerful opening, and so I try to hook the reader into this story, into caring very much about this character Hannah and what's going to happen to her. It's a mystery. A murder does occur, but in fact, the detective is one of the lesser characters. Hannah's the major one, and the mystery is only part of the story. How does she survive?
Wow.
So then, I wrote a sequel where the detective and Hannah play a more significant role, and the publisher liked the novel very much. That has a terrific ending, a 2-word ending, but it's terrific. But then,
I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, no,
I just had to say that.
Oh yeah. Well, with both of them, you got to read to the last sentence.
Yeah.
You don't know what's going to happen until the very last sentence in both books. But the publisher liked it so much that I decided to write. She asked if I would do a third. That's when I did the prequel.
Huh.
Now, this one I'm very excited about because I think it has an opportunity to be a better seller. The first novel begins in September 1939. The sequel is in 1945, 46. But the prequel begins in 1931. At a time in Munich when Hitler is still 2 years away from becoming the dictator of Germany. But at this particular time, he's walking a fine line. Some of the Nazis in the north, Gregor Strasser, who runs the Nazi party in Berlin, Ernst Röhm, who you may have heard as the SA leader, were the socialists among the National Socialists. They believed that the Nazi Party should be focusing on the working person. Hitler wanted his climb to be as legal as possible. So he was courting the rich, the upper classes, the industrialists. So there were people in his party that didn't like that. So he's walking a fine line. He wants to kind of distance himself from the violence that's in the streets. There's constantly, since the end of World War I, there's been assassinations. The communists and the Nazis are fighting one another. At the beginning of 1931, some of the SA commit murder. And a Jewish attorney named Hans Litten brings the murderers to trial in Berlin. He brings Hitler in to testify because he wants to make it clear to the German public that Hitler's rhetoric is what caused this murder. He's trying to tie in and say, your rhetoric, you're as guilty of this murder as these two men. This, should redound to what's going on today.
Yeah.
So throughout the summer of 1931, Hitler's getting this bad publicity. You've committed perjury on the witness stand. While this is going on, Hitler has moved into a lavish apartment in Munich. He has the entire 5th floor of a building. He has his half-sister Anna come in as his housekeeper, and she brings in her daughter, Hitler's niece, Geli Raubel. Geli is in her early 20s. Hitler is in his early to mid 40s. He falls madly in love with Geli Raubel. We've all heard of Eva Braun. We know what he ends up marrying her. They commit suicide at the end. But Geli Raubel was the love of his life. She loved to be seen on in arms with her uncle. He's a powerful man. He loved being seen out in the street with a beautiful young woman. They'd go to the theater. They'd go to restaurants. He loved treating her out to department stores and buying her fancy things. There was some kind of a sexual relationship. I don't think we know exactly, except Geli is known to have told friends that what he made her do was disgusting. But there may have been still some thought of her marrying him. He wasn't capable of having a normal sexual relationship with her, but he kept her on a very tight leash. In September of 1939, as Hannah is being taken to the euthanasia center, and as Germany is invading, oh no, I'm sorry, wrong. This is 1931. I got ahead of myself. But in 1931, in September, Hitler and Geli are overheard to have a huge argument. She wants to go to Austria. He doesn't want her to go. He wants to keep her close to him. The next morning, the house staff of Hitler's apartment has to break into her bedroom because it's locked from the inside. She's found dead with a shotgun wound to the chest. This is true. This is Hitler's followers, his leading people like Rudolf Hess, have orchestrated to make it declared as a suicide. And that's what it has come down to through history, that Geli Raubel committed suicide. But was it? She died, she was shot in her bedroom in Hitler's apartment with Hitler's gun. She and Hitler were heard to be arguing. When the police got there, we do know from their report that the shot went through her chest, through her lungs, and the bullet ended up by her hip. It never left her body.
It's really a hard angle to get.
Exactly. You would not commit suicide by holding a gun up here.
Yeah.
She was also in the midst of writing a letter to a friend saying, I can hardly wait to go to Austria. She was interrupted by someone in the midst of that letter. So it's quite clear that this was not a suicide, but what did happen. So the novel that's going to be coming out is the murder investigation of Adolf Hitler. And the main character here is Avi Chrysler, who is a Jewish detective. He's not a very religious man. He's completely unreligious. But he's brought in, and he knows right off the bat there's something fishy here. Other murders have occurred too, associated with that of Geli Raubel. But he has a relationship with two women. Charlotte Leinsdorf, Lottie, who is the only daughter of a wealthy German couple who wants her to marry a Nazi so that they can get in good with the party. And Annie Leuenberg, who is a communist. Very different, but he cares about them both. Arnie's editor wants Chrysler to dig in deep. They want to bring Hitler to trial on charge of murder. It's not the communist newspapers come out in Munich saying not suicide, murder. They want him to dig evidence. There's a prosecutor in Munich that wants him to get the evidence, and they want to bring Hitler to trial, not as a witness, but as the culprit who committed murder against his own niece, with whom he was having a bizarre sexual relationship. This, of course, would destroy Hitler and the Nazi Party. But that's what the novel's about. We know, obviously, from history that Hitler comes to power. But I still think it's a powerful novel, and people reading it will learn, among other things, what you may have just learned now. This is a true story. This really happened.
Wow.
There's so many twists and turns in history that we can't possibly cover it all when we study it.
Yeah.
Even when we're living through the time period, we can't possibly get everything because there's so much going on.
Yeah, well, had this happened, Hitler probably could have been destroyed, but you never know. I mean, like certain people today, they can seem to get away with anything, and they still have millions of people that will follow them.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
who knows? Maybe it would not have had any effect. But some of the people who would have been witnesses in that trial were found murdered. The prosecutor fled to Austria, so it never happened.
Mm. But
it's still, an interesting story. You care about Chrysler the detective, what he's going through, the two women in his life, and even Hannah Ziegler makes a very small cameo as a child.
Mm.
So I think that story is not just a mystery, but just the whole political backdrop makes it, I would think, an interesting read for people who are not only interested in mystery, but interested in that period, or just in a good involving story. And you can learn something without being textbook boring.
It's so funny. So, Peter, you seem to like to bring history and other aspects of politics actually into your writing a lot.
Some of it. Now, LIGEIA, which you mentioned before, is very different. This one takes place in 1850, and it presumes that Abraham Lincoln was not the first president of the United States to be assassinated, that Zachary Taylor was. Taylor may well have died of poisoning, but that's not the concept of the novel. And LIGEIA is one of Zachary Taylor's White House slaves.
Oh.
And she bonds with Edgar Allan Poe in a unique way and trying to uncover what happened to Zachary Taylor. So again, you'll learn something about history and hopefully have good characters and make it an interesting read.
So what did you do before you got all your books published? What was your side gig?
Oh, well, when I was living in Boston, and see, people think I'm at work today. That's what that phone is. Pardon me, it's going to ring about 18 annoying times before it stops.
Mm.
But so I was living in Boston, doing writing, not sure, it's still unclear what I wanted to do. And this was at a time when there was a lot of gentrification going on, when there was a lot of condo conversions. I lived in a building that was burned out and turned over like 4 or 5 times. Each time it turned over, the value of the building grew and grew. And this was going on.
Yeah.
So I joined the tenant movement. I worked for the Arson Prevention Commission. I worked at City Hall, and I would one of the things I would do was I would go to the Registry of Deeds every day and find out what buildings had filings for master condo deeds, which apartment buildings were being converted. I would then put on my tenant hat and go to those buildings and leaflet it, saying your building is going condo. Here are your rights. So I got involved with housing in various degrees. And then I got a job with Action for Boston Community Development in Boston, a nonprofit, doing housing search for homeless families, families that ended up in shelter, trying to get them subsidized. And after I was unduly fired from there in 2006.
You got fired from helping
Yeah,
people?
yeah, well,
Were you too radical, Peter?
I don't know what it was. But yeah, I was fired, and now, so since I've been working for Community Teamwork in Lowell, Same idea. Nonprofit, they do fuel assistance, childcare, a first-time home buyer. So I work with a program that can provide funds to people who are at risk of being evicted or who are homeless, trying to get deposit to move into an apartment, or to help people who have utility shut-off notices to prevent the shut-off.
So
And
that
because of, and because of the rising rents, I don't foresee myself being able to stop working unless a book sells. So please, please buy my book.
so you balance these intense research history books with basically jobs that are heartfelt protections of people. Finding housing and protecting rights, that's pretty radical.
I don't know about you, I just find it very difficult living in a world where it just seems so bizarre that somebody like you know who can be so popular when he's so obviously terrible. It's just how it's just mentally wearing to have to put up with this every day, and to think that this could go on for so in my own little way, maybe I can have my own soapbox and talk about what life should be and how we all interrelated. You know, we are very territorial. We don't like people who live in another city or another state or another country, but people should understand that we live on a mote of dust in a universe that is essentially endless. This is our territory, Earth. We're all one family. Why can't we just learn to get along with one another? What's the problem?
That, Peter, is a contextual question.
No, our territory, people should understand. We live on, there's nothing else in a universe billions of light years across, potentially, probably infinite. This is the only place where we can live, and here we are fighting over it.
Yeah.
You know, if we kill ourselves off, you'll have this entire universe, and there might not be a living thing in it that understands that it even exists. It makes no sense.
Wow. Well, I hate to leave us with this very philosophical and spiritual question, but that's where we are, and that's where we've come, and that actually is really profound, Peter. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
To hear more of Peter's works, please join us for his reading and Q&A at our September Arts Saturday. You can register through Eventbrite. And we'd like to thank our sponsors for making this program possible, and all of our programs possible, particularly the Dracut Cultural Council, who offers funding through the Massachusetts Cultural Council. Please support your local cultural councils. They do fantastic jobs of getting the arts to us all. If you'd like to get any of Peter's books, please go to our online bookstore. That's bookshop.org/shop/Dracut Arts. To become a sponsor and find out more about our Art Saturdays and other programs, please email us at dracutarts@gmail.com or visit our website, dracutarts.com. This and all our programs are archived on the Dracut Arts YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/@dracutarts. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. Yeah.